nobody understands anything, nobody believes anything, and nobody remembers anything unless it's repeated like 1,000 times. So the propaganda minister who worked for Hitler, who said that you have to just keep pounding it into their head, the bigger the lie, the more they'll believe it. That's true. And the point is whether you're lying or not. If you're saying the truth and saying it a lot of times, that's okay. If you're saying the same thing and you're lying, that isn't. The Canadian media saying that the big lie is that there was corruption and fraudulence in the United States election, they're lying. They're saying it again and again, and they're lying. That's not okay. A teacher repeats himself. And so I'm going to repeat this. Democracy is a system that was developed by people who respected the rights and opinions and intelligence of individuals and sought to overcome the default position of humanity, which is tyranny and subjugation. That's what it's for. If that has been established, then the citizens of a country, and it has to be a country, because how else could it be organized? The world is too large. The citizens of a country have to have the ability to talk about things that are important to them, and they need to make politicians understand that politicians are there at the service of the individual. That's what it's for. Right? That is being lost. What we say is that woke authoritarianism is destroying the precious aspects of Western civilization. That's what they mean. The precious aspect of Western civilization is that if you want to make an argument, you have to back it up with evidence. You can't just say that you're an expert and make that make sense and think that that's the last word. Theresa Tam claimed to be the expert and got everything wrong. Almost everything. She didn't see that the Communist Party using gain of function research created that virus and either accidentally or on purpose let it go. She didn't understand that they tried to restrict its spread inside Canada, inside China, but it let it spread to the rest of the world. We believed that they were going to provide us with a vaccine when they didn't. That caused a lot of suffering, a lot of damage, a lot of economic damage in Canada. And it's around this idea that you can't trust the average person to make a decent decision. Pass it over to the government. They'll pass it on to an expert. It was not Justin Trudeau's job to pretend he was smarter than everybody by saying, we'll listen to the experts. That doesn't work if the experts got it wrong. Right? Right? They got it wrong. Over the course of thousands of years, we developed systems that were violated by the Trudeau government and by governments all over the world, but he may have been the worst one recently, such as the rule of law, which is intended to ensure that people who break the law in high positions face something reasonable. Some reasonable punishment. You can't have a member of the government getting away with a kokanee robe when the rest of us don't, or wearing blackface when the rest of us would lose our job. Trudeau's not worth it. We shouldn't have forgiven him those things. He's a moron, and I feel sorry for him. And those are minor things. But it's the rule of law. It's standards for me, but for thee, but not for me. But the worst thing, maybe this is the worst, it's hard to say what the worst thing is, violating the independence of the judiciary. If you have a ruling class telling the judiciary what to do, the judiciary will put the ruling class's opponents in prison and limit their freedom of expression and persecute them for crimes they didn't commit. Because that's what people do. They seek power. Okay? He's a power tripper. That single episode should have been enough to disqualify him from serving as prime minister. That single episode. And the reason that it didn't is because you've got Canadians coming from an educational system that was designed by a government. What are the chances that an authoritarian government is going to produce students who know the first thing about democracy? And knowing the first thing about democracy, which is a way to challenge the power of the ruling class, would challenge them. And so what we've got is a population who doesn't have the balls to stand up to them, has been fattened by the money that they've borrowed to give people, and violating the principle that people should be free to live without the tyranny of the upper class. They're limiting freedom of expression, cancel culture, all of the rest of it, M36, M103. Those are all attempts to limit freedom of expression. Freedom of expression is the most important freedom because with it, you can argue for the rest. And it's also an acknowledgement that one of the worst things that you could do to a person is limit their ability to speak rationally about issues that concern him. You might as well kill him. If you're not going to respect a person's right to talk about how his tax dollars are spent, what sort of education is being given to his own children, he's essentially being treated as something less than human by an elite class. Independence of the judiciary, freedom of speech. Those are the two biggest things. The right to a fair trial. C-51, Jody Wilson-Raybould introduced the bill, and it was accepted. As a defendant in a sexual assault case now, you have to give the prosecution the evidence that you have, which is problematic because as the defendant in any sort of case, one of the ways that you can prove yourself innocent is by showing the inaccuracy of the prosecution's case. So if the prosecution says to you, yeah, there you did it. In 1969, in a green Volkswagen, you raped this chick. You don't have to tell them that you didn't own a Volkswagen and that you weren't in Canada in 1969. And hey, she's not my type. Now you have to tell them that. So what they can say is, okay, it wasn't a green Volkswagen. It wasn't in 1970. The chances of you getting a fair trial in a sexual assault case in Canada were minimized significantly. You don't want that because what it does is it allows the ruling class to selectively persecute people. Right? You don't believe that people should have the opportunity to speak freely about issues that concern them? You don't think that they should have a judiciary that's independent of the ruling class? You don't think they're entitled to a fair trial? These are the things that they're doing, okay? I'm just doing this off the top of my head. I've been studying this for years. If you go along with it, then you're going to get what you get. What Trudeau did over the last couple of years is he borrowed enough money to give it away to the wealthy ruling class. And he'll particularly spend it on people of color, females, and gay people, and transgendered. Because people will say, okay, the money's cool. I'll take the money. I'll just vote for you. That's what he did. He's buying the election. Right? So if you don't mind being bought off, then that's okay. And if you're, the more elite you are, the more money he gave you. Mm-hmm. What are the chances that a government-run educational system is going to teach people the skills that they need to challenge the ruling class. Canadians don't know anything about democracy, nothing important. And they won't stand up for it because they weren't even taught to cherish the values, equality of opportunity. Forget it, we've got diversity. You should get what you work for. Forget it, we've got equality of outcome. Just throw it all away. On an essentially a set of racist and sexist assumptions against probably the greatest people that have ever existed. Sorry, but white people invented democracy. White people invented the system that I'm talking about. I think so many of us are so stupid now, and always have been. But we weren't trained to be this stupid before. Now we're being trained to be stunningly ignorant and, in a sense, proud of our ignorance. The biggest issue is what the media has done on the lab leak hypothesis. They tried to prevent people from talking about it. It was a valid hypothesis from the beginning. Election fraud happened. No photo ID in a lot of places, weak signature verification, ballot harvesting, intimidation of people opening the ballots, the mainstream media and big tech taking a side. So they literally limited the two biggest stories of the last year or two: election fraud, and the fact that China released that. They tried to prevent us from talking about that. CBC is the word. They're so pathetic, nobody watches them anymore. But it's interesting what they say. Along with the left-wing media, unfounded allegations of election fraud. We know that there was election fraud and massive amounts of it. They've already taken steps to make sure that people have to have photo ID when they vote. Most black people support that. Most white people support it. And the people who support it the most are Latin Americans. The Democrats actually think that they're going to get people to come into the country illegally and vote for them. And in that way, they're going to maintain their grip on power. The Mexicans that are going to come in are seeing through them. They lost control of the border. That means that tens, hundreds of thousands of people, women, are being forced into prostitution under control of the Mexican cocaine cartel. That is on them. BLM is creating havoc and crime and instability and fear in almost every American city. That is on the Democrats. The BLM, Justin Trudeau, this is the most incredibly disgusting thing I think that I've ever seen. I've seen a lot of disgusting things. It didn't look disgusting unless you knew what was happening. Justin Trudeau subjugated himself in the middle of a COVID epidemic to the Black Lives Matter terrorist organization. They've got a protection racket. Nice little shoe company, feed us cash, support our cause, or we'll go online and say that you're a racist. We're going to bust down the city, pay us, or we tear down your city. We kill and hurt the people that we claim to be protecting, which is black people, the most. At some point, you have to be able to say, and the government should say, the Canadian government should say, look, you are hurting the people you claim to be protecting. This is when we're done with you. This is when we're done with educational systems that support BLM or Antifa or any of the rest. I had 15 minutes. I hope I did a good job.